So welcome everyone to the second Q&A session of this retreat. Who would like to begin?
If I may, Delson. It's more of a general question about how we relate to people who are outside of the Dhamma circle. Over the last 10 years or so, I've been accumulating a lot of friends outside of the Dhamma circle. And sometimes I do tell them Dhamma, but not name it as Buddhism or anything of that sort. But the other way also happens. We tend to suck in some of their beliefs ever so minutely over time that we tend to forget about what actually constitutes the Dhamma. So my question there is, what is the role of friendships and how far should we take them outside of the Dhamma circles?
You should extend the friendship all the way across the universe and beyond. So that is having metta for all, no matter what. Having that friendly attitude towards all. You know, when it comes to discussing one's, let's say, beliefs or practice or experience, it can be warranted whenever somebody is interested and asks a question related to, you know, something like, I notice that you are different, that you react differently to situations. What is it that you're doing, and so on. So those can be considered like prompts to be able to teach or to provide some kind of information on what you do. And of course, leading by example. And when it comes to discussing and where you start to pick up, let's say, things that you say are outside the Dhamma, we have to look at what the Dhamma really is in terms of understanding what it's all about. It's understanding cause and effect at the most fundamental level. It's about understanding that there are causes and conditions that lead one to a certain choice, and those choices then can become causes and conditions for the next set of circumstances in one's life. And this is understood in different ways, like dependent origination and through the process of the five aggregates and so on. So whatever you have discussions with, whenever you have any discussions with anyone, and something seems to be very, very uplifting, or something that seems to gel well with your understanding of loving kindness and compassion and so on, then by all means, it's good to incorporate that. There's language used in the context of the Dhamma, and sometimes there's language that is beyond the scope of what is taught in the suttas. But if you are really to reflect closely, you can see how a lot of things can be illustrated through the words of the Dhamma. Modern neuroscience, parts of modern neuroscience, parts of cognitive behavioral therapy, and other schools of psychology can all have similarities with understanding cause and effect, one's mentality, materiality, and so on. But then if you start to pick up things that start to, let's say, are not in alignment with what you know to be, or what you know to have understanding of in terms of cause and effect, then you just see it as that and let it go. So it's a matter of always checking in with the mind, seeing what the views are held in the mind. The basic right view, the fundamental right view, whether it's mundane or super mundane, is the understanding of the Four Noble Truths. So you can keep the Four Noble Truths as your Rosetta Stone, if you will. in trying to understand what's going on in relation to neuroscience, in relation to behavioral therapy, in relation to whatever else people are saying, and see if it negates or if it gels with the Four Noble Truths.
Thank you, Delson.
So I had a question, Delson.
Yes.
Again, just a general question related to life and Dhamma is that, we're going through a very difficult pandemic in India now. And there's things one can do to help around, you know, and there's also, you can do inner work so that you can maintain your equanimity and help maybe a smaller circle, or you could get a little hassled and help us, like, not use that time for inner work and help a slightly wider circle. It's a tough choice, how much to engage externally versus how much time to give internally. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say, well, for one, generally this pandemic situation has been a good opportunity for people to go inwards. Different places have different conditions and different kinds of lockdowns and curfews and things like that. But ultimately, it has provided people the ability to stay at home and then really work with their mind, meditate, do whatever practice it is that you're doing. And then when you want to engage with people, when you want to help other people, see it as an opportunity to continue your practice. You see, there shouldn't be any delineation between doing the inner work at a certain set period or a certain scope. It should be that here is an opportunity in the active life, in the life where one is dealing with people, dealing with difficult situations and extending help and so on. In that sense, you're practicing generosity with your ability to help in whatever way you can. It's also an opportunity for you to practice that equanimity further. And then, of course, compassion. Compassion and equanimity are the two really main foundations that one can have for this pandemic period. Because compassion, especially for people who are suffering, as well as suffering from the symptoms and so on, but also people in the healthcare industry as well, and other tertiary aspects of that, where there are family members and relatives in grief or suffering because of somebody else is in the hospital and so on. So you can be generous with your time, generous with your support, emotional support, and so on. And that's a practice of compassion. Equanimity is needed when you see the suffering, and sometimes it becomes too much. So you have to understand that the compassion that one provides is a compassion where one wants to ease the suffering of others, wants to be able to let go of the attachment to the other person's suffering as well. And then equanimity helps to keep the mind balanced no matter what. So compassion is engaging, but it's not engaging to a point where the mind identifies with another's suffering and starts to make that and take ownership of that suffering. If that happens, then it'll be difficult to continue to help. So you have to balance it to understand that true compassion is really being there for another individual, being there for people and beings, to be able to give them the support that they require, but at the same time understand that that is their process that's going on, and not to take ownership of that.
Okay, thanks.
Are there no more questions?
Not from my side.
I have one question, Delson, but you can choose not to answer that as well, because it's a bit more general to answer it, I suppose. Why is TRIM not so popular, Delson?
Why is TWIM not so popular? I don't have an answer to that question. Some things are popular and some things are unpopular, but this isn't about, growing the community at a pace that makes it popular or unpopular. If it's effective and if it helps people, people are pretty satisfied with that and very content with their practice. The interesting thing about the Dhamma and really being able to genuinely practice is that there's no real desire to preach. There's no real desire to convert people, to the practice. They're pretty content. A lot of people are very content with what they're doing. And it's because of the personality shifts and the personality changes that other people start to notice it, and they become very interested sometimes in knowing what is it that you're doing. There are opportunities there to say, I'm doing this practice and this is, I saw this video. If you'd like, you can check it out. You can attend a retreat and so on. But I don't think the goal there is really to spread the teaching as such. It's more of spending time for yourself and being able to develop your own mind. And of course, if you feel, or if anyone feels like this could be of benefit to a friend of theirs or to another family member or to a relative, then by all means, you can share the teachings that you've learned and say, I've gotten some benefit from this, and maybe this might be of help to you. And you leave it at that. There's no force here. There's no. Otherwise, it becomes a conceited effort, and it becomes something where this has benefited me, and therefore it's going to benefit everybody else. That would be counterintuitive to the teaching itself, because it's a matter of self-effacement. It's a matter of understanding what this concept of self is and letting go of it. Once that's let go of, and there's not a lot of interest in the self anymore, there's not a lot of interest in taking ownership of the practice and then projecting it onto others as an extension of self.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to meditate with you and ask you questions.
Absolutely.
Hello, Delson, I have a question.
Yes.
Like when we practice or do anything, there's some curiosity and interest for a period of time where there's a lot of enthusiasm, deep interest, and a lot of effort into anything. I mean, either practice or anything that we do. And at some point, when we are good at it, or we know that we are doing it well, and at a certain period, even when we start to really become like solid, then it seems like the mind doesn't want to keep up that enthusiasm and interest there. it's like, oh, okay, yeah, it's like, so I've seen that in my, whatever I do, like learn or I draw, I don't even paint anymore because it's just like, okay, anyway, it's like too good. Yeah. It's like I've lost interest. And so regarding meditation or whatever forgiveness that I'm doing now, how to keep up that kind of interest for a prolonged period of time, or at least consistently?
Yeah. So there are two components to this. Number one is in terms of cognition and in terms of the mind itself. The mind is structured in such a way that as soon as it starts to learn something new and there's some interest taken into it, it starts to use that interest as a way to soak in that information and be able to get some level of comfort and then eventually mastery over whatever that new skill is, whether it's meditation or the twin practice or whatever it might be. And the mind then takes shortcuts in the sense that it doesn't take too much effort anymore to be able to do the same things that were done in the beginning. And so that denotes a level of comfort with that skill, a level of mastery, let's say, over that skill. So that's why you have this concept, specifically in Zen, which is the beginner's mind. And that helps you to continuously be mindful that the mind doesn't slip up and take what is being done for granted. It's like when you first learn how to ride a bike or drive a car, you're very you're very aware and very attentive of the things that you're doing. You take things slowly, you do things very carefully and diligently. And then later on, after you have some level of mastery over it, you can drive a car one-handed while drinking a cup of coffee and talking to a friend and listening to the radio all at the same time, because the skill has become so embedded in the mind. So that's one component of it, which is when you come to a point in meditation, it's easier to get into jhana, it's easier to do these things. And so you have to have the beginner's mind continuously, that you don't slip up and take it for granted and then start to slip in your effort to make the 6R process or to do the 6R process, or in your effort to be mindful generally in your daily life of any hindrances, craving, or aversion that arises. Now, the second component to that is that you said, for example, the example of painting, that someone is really good at painting, and then they just don't have interest in it anymore. So that is just the lack of seeing the newness of what is possible. Using the example of painting, or any other creative skill, there are so many different things one can do with that skill. Likewise, with meditation, you can see that the meditation can get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper until you finally break all fetters and you attain that part of the mind or that state of mind or that attainment where there's no such thing as interest or non-interest. Everything just flows in that moment, and there is still that state of natural flow. There's a freshness to every moment. So it can be exercised with your practice and your skill to utilize that beginner's mind every time you go into the practice. You have that enthusiasm to say, okay, let's see what happens today. And without any expectations, you have to genuinely have that attitude of, let's see what happens today, not with the expectation that something wonderful is going to happen or that you're going to have too many hindrances. But that process, that neutrality of that process of let's see what happens today with this meditation will open up the mind to be genuinely interested in what comes up. If it's hindrances, the mind takes note of that, is able to use a 6R properly, and then continue on with keeping its attention on the object and so on. And so that's the wonderful thing. Anything can happen during that meditation process. You might get into a deeper state of jhana. You might get into understanding a deeper aspect of a certain jhana, or whatever it might be. If you maintain that attitude, that every time that you sit, there's a possibility of something new happening in terms of exploring what is happening in relation to the feeling of loving kindness, in relation to the feeling of forgiveness, or whatever it might be. You see, meditation should not be routine. It's not something you just do. It's not something you have to get out of the way to do in your routine or schedule. That's habitude. That's creating it, making it into a habit in such a way that it becomes a chore. Meditation is not a chore. It is both very fun and a very serious endeavor, in the sense that it's serious because it really deals with the mind and the different components of the mind that help you, so to speak, interact with the world in a way that can be loving and kind and so on, and lets you see the world in a different perspective through that meditative process. And it's fun because, like I said before, it can bring up a lot of different things. The key here is not to get forlorn or not to get discouraged if hindrances arise. See those as opportunities to let go of negative karma in that sense. Let go of effects of previous unwholesome choices that might have arisen before. And whenever you see it and you let go of it, it's an opportunity to let go of that karma and come back to a state of neutrality and balance. And of course, once you start to practice in this way, it gives you that level of mastery, so that every time you practice, you just get a deeper sense of that experience. You get a deeper sense of the jhana. You get a deeper sense of the different factors of the jhana and so on. So treat meditation as something sacred, not something that's just part of your schedule. It is something that is very formidable in the sense of what it can do for you. If you change your perception of meditation in that way, that it's not something that you have to do or something that you need to do, but it's something that you get to do and you get to enjoy doing as well.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. We'll give it a few more seconds and see if anyone has any more questions. And if not, we'll share some merit. Okay, let's share some merit.
May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.